1934. Bienville Parish, Louisiana. The stolen Ford F-8 idled on a dusty country road, its windows rolled halfway down. Two lovers sat inside, laughing, carefree. Then, a sudden crack of rifles from the trees. Seconds later, the car was riddled with 130 bullets. Their bodies slumped forward, twisted by violence, immortalized in legend. This wasn't just an arrest gone wrong. This was an execution. Because what Bonnie and Clyde had done was unforgivable. If you're into stories where romance turns deadly, where bullets replace wedding bells, and justice ends in an ambush, like this video, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this is the story of America's deadliest love affair. Dallas, Texas, January 1930. Bonnie Parker was just 19 years old. Petite. Sharp. Restless. She waited tables, scribbled poetry, and dreamed of movie sets, not diners. One cold afternoon, she met Clyde Barrow. 21 years old. Charming, soft-spoken, and on parole. He was small but wiry. Had a confidence that didn't match his size. They locked eyes, and it was over. He had a way of talking, she once wrote. Soft like sugar, until it turned to steel. Clyde didn't tell her about the banks, the heists, or the blood. But he didn't have to. Bonnie saw it in his eyes. Weeks later, Clyde was arrested and sent back to prison. Bonnie smuggled him a gun in a fruitcake. He broke out, but was captured again. When Clyde was finally released in 1932, he came back changed, harder, colder. He no longer cared about second chances. He wanted money, guns, and revenge, especially on the Texas prison system. Bonnie didn't hesitate. She joined him. Not as a tag-along, but as a partner. Their gang started small, Clyde's brother Buck, Buck's wife Blanche, and a few drifters. Their first robberies were messy. Sometimes, they only got a few bucks. But in April 1932, it turned fatal. In a botched robbery, a store clerk reached for a gun. Clyde shot him dead. It was the first kill. And once the line was crossed, they never went back. They became drifters. Sleeping in fields. Robbing stores and gas stations by day. Writing poetry and taking smiling photographs by night. Newspapers called them romantic rebels. But in reality, they were becoming monsters. As Bonnie and Clyde's spree spread across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri, they left behind a trail of robbery victims, dead policemen, hijacked vehicles, terrified witnesses. They didn't just kill, they humiliated law enforcement. In one shootout, they outgunned 6 officers and vanished into the woods. The FBI wasn't even officially called FBI yet. It was the Bureau of Investigation. But they had had enough. In 1934, Director J. Edgar Hoover created a special task force to bring them down. This was no longer a manhunt. It was a war. May 22, 1934, Louisiana. The Bureau received a tip. Bonnie and Clyde were hiding with a friend, Henry Methvin. Agents worked with Henry's father, Ivy Methvin, to set a trap. They parked Ivy's truck by the road, pretending it had broken down. Bonnie and Clyde were expected to pass by at dawn. At 9:15 a.m., the Ford F-8 appeared. Clyde slowed down, spotting the familiar truck. That's when 6 officers stepped out of the woods, rifles aimed. There was no warning. They opened fire. 130 rounds in less than 20 seconds. Clyde died instantly. Bonnie screamed. But no one stopped shooting. Photos of their bullet-ridden bodies went viral, 1930s style. Newspapers printed their final moments. Crowds gathered at funeral homes. Souvenir hunters tried to cut off Bonnie's hair. Kids idolized them. Songs were written. They became folk heroes. But the truth. They were armed killers who left 9 officers dead, dozens wounded, and towns paralyzed in fear. Their love story ended in blood, not roses. And behind the romance was something far more disturbing. 2 young people who felt unstoppable until the bullets hit bone. February 4, 1974, Berkeley, California. It was just after 9 p.m. Patricia Hearst, 19 years old, was curled up in her apartment, studying and preparing for a quiet night. Her fiancé, Stephen Weed, was nearby. Then, a loud crash at the door. 3 people burst in with rifles drawn. Stephen was beaten. Patty was dragged down the hallway, blindfolded, screaming. Witnesses said the assailants were yelling something political. They weren't common criminals. They were soldiers of a cause. Patty Hearst, granddaughter of publishing tycoon William Randolph Hearst, was now the center of a kidnapping the FBI had never seen before. And soon, it would get even weirder. The kidnappers were members of the Symbionese Liberation Army, or SLA, a fringe Marxist militant group that believed in class war, black liberation, and violent revolution. Days after the abduction, the SLA sent a cassette tape to a local radio station. It contained Patty's voice, trembling, terrified. "Mom, Dad, I'm okay. I've been kidnapped by the SLA. Please do what they ask." The SLA demanded the Hearst family donate $70 million worth of food to poor people in California. The family scrambled. They launched a $2 million program immediately. But it wasn't enough. Then came another tape. This time, Patty's voice had changed. Stronger, colder. "I have joined the struggle of the Symbionese Liberation Army." The next time America saw her, she was holding a machine gun. April 15, 1974, San Francisco. Surveillance cameras rolled inside the Hibernia Bank. 2 masked gunmen burst in, screaming commands. Behind them, a young woman in a beret, holding an M1 carbine rifle, calm and commanding. That woman was Patty Hearst. She wasn't a hostage anymore. She was now calling herself Tanya, named after a Cuban revolutionary. She pointed her rifle at terrified customers and yelled for them to get down. Over $10,000 was stolen. And when the footage aired nationwide, jaws dropped. "Is that Patty Hearst?" reporters asked. "Is this a brainwashing or a betrayal?" As weeks passed, the country split into 2 camps. The believers, who thought Patty had been brainwashed by her captors, using fear, isolation, and abuse. The doubters, who believed she had flipped, seduced by the SLA's ideology and power. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in US history. But Patty and the SLA went underground, pulling off 2 more bank robberies, hiding in safe houses, swapping stolen cars. She appeared in more photos, holding weapons, laughing, raising her fist. The innocent college girl was now the poster child of radical rebellion. Or was she just playing the role, to stay alive? If you're stunned by how fast this descent happened, share this video. Hit like, and subscribe. Because what happens next will turn a rebel fantasy into a fiery hell. May 17, 1974, Los Angeles. A tip led FBI agents to a small home on East 54th Street. Inside were 6 members of the SLA, but not Patty. At 5:50 p.m., the standoff began. Police surrounded the building with SWAT, armored vehicles, and snipers. Then, gunfire erupted. The house caught fire. Tear gas canisters exploded inside. Bullets flew through the windows. Over 9,000 rounds were fired in under 2 hours. Inside the flames, SLA members refused to surrender. 5 women and 1 man died in the blaze. Their bodies were found in fetal positions, clutching rifles. It was live on TV. The first domestic urban assault ever aired in America. And Patty? She was still missing. September 18, 1975, San Francisco. After more than a year on the run, Patty Hearst was arrested in a San Francisco apartment, armed and sleeping beside fellow fugitive Wendy Yoshimura. She didn't resist. She was pale, thin, silent. During her trial, Patty's lawyers argued she had Stockholm Syndrome, that she'd been threatened, beaten, locked in closets, sexually assaulted. The prosecution said otherwise. They showed photos, played tapes, pointed to the fact that even after the firestorm, she stayed loyal. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison. President Jimmy Carter later commuted her sentence after 2 years. But the debate still rages. Was she a victim or a traitor? Patty Hearst faded from the public eye, but her story reshaped how America views radicalization, psychological coercion, media glamorization of crime. She became a case study in universities, a character in songs, movies, and late-night jokes. But for the families of the SLA's victims, and the bank employees she pointed rifles at, she wasn't a joke. She was a question mark no one could answer. Was she a lost girl trying to survive? Or the daughter of power, playing rebel until it got real? March 24, 1997, downtown Los Angeles. The sun had barely risen over La's skyline when two security guards climbed into a Loomis armored truck, beginning their routine cash pickup route. For 12 years, Jeffrey Erickson had worn the same uniform, greeted the same bank managers, and followed the same routes. He was polite, on time, trustworthy. But what nobody knew was this. Jeffrey had spent the past 6 months memorizing routes, watching bank schedules, and recruiting 2 ex-con friends with military backgrounds. And today, they were going to bleed the city dry. 3 hours into the shift, Jeffrey pulled the truck into a narrow alley behind a downtown office tower. His partner, Tony, casually stepped out to use the bathroom in the building. But instead of returning, Tony vanished. From across the street, a blue sedan pulled up. 2 men in masks emerged with military precision, armed with suppressed rifles. They moved like shadows, swift, silent, merciless. One fired 3 shots into the driver's side window. The other opened the back, emptying bags of cash, coins, and checks. The heist lasted under 90 seconds. No alarms.
No witnesses. No screams.
Just the soft hum of tires rolling away. Loomis supervisors initially assumed Jeffrey had been killed. His blood was on the seat. The camera wire was cut. But the body, it wasn't found in the truck. Within hours, suspicions grew. Footage from nearby security cameras revealed that the masked man wasn't a stranger. He had Jeffrey's build, his gait, his movement. Police issued a bolo, but Erickson had already disappeared. Not to Mexico. Not to Vegas. He went home. Home to his wife Jill, a former dispatcher for the police department, now his partner in planning. The perfect inside couple. 3 months later, a second Loomis truck was hit. Same MO. Same alley. Same cold silence. But this time, one of the guards managed to fire back before dying. Bullets pierced the truck. Sirens echoed too soon. A witness caught the plate of the getaway car. The net tightened. Jeffrey and Jill moved from cheap motel to cheap motel, changing cars, changing names. But the cash, it ran out faster than they thought. They weren't building a future. They were funding a countdown. June 1, 1997, Glendale, California. A local officer spotted a stolen white Chevy Suburban matching the one used in the last robbery. He approached slowly, weapon holstered. But before he could speak, bullets tore through his windshield. Jeffrey was behind the wheel. The chase that followed left 3 officers wounded, 2 cars flipped, and the entire city on edge. The final standoff happened in a parking garage. Dozens of officers surrounded them. Jill screamed at Jeffrey to run. But he didn't. He stepped out of the vehicle with his gun drawn. "Don't move," one officer yelled. Jeffrey smiled, then raised his weapon. Shots rang out. He dropped to the concrete. Dead. Jill tried to flee, but she was arrested, sobbing. Not for Jeffrey, but for the life she chose to destroy. The Ericksons had stolen nearly $2 million, but they didn't live like millionaires. They never bought a mansion. They never left the country. They just ran, exhausted and empty, living out of fast food wrappers and fear. Investigators found detailed journals at Jill's apartment. Meticulous sketches. Bank routes. Guard habits. But the saddest thing? She wrote about how bored she was. How the adrenaline made her feel alive. How the money didn't matter. They weren't chasing wealth. They were chasing chaos. The Loomis company revamped its entire internal security system after the heists. New guards. New rules. Cameras in every corner. But no policy could erase the fear Jeffrey left behind. He was one of them. He wore the uniform. He joked with dispatch. He handed out holiday cards. And yet, he murdered. For what? For paper? For fun? For freedom? His story didn't become a legend. It became a warning. That even in places built on trust, the most dangerous enemy can be the one who knows your schedule. Bonnie and Clyde. Patty Hearst. Jeffrey Erickson. 3 very different stories. Different decades. Different motives. But all of them set the world on fire in their own way. One killed out of defiance. Another robbed out of indoctrination. And the last betrayed everyone who trusted him. But here's what they all had in common. They walked into the vaults of power and chose to burn them down. They weren't caught in the act. They weren't stopped by alarms. They were stopped by obsession, narcissism, and bloodshed. At what point does a rebel become a villain? When does a victim become an accomplice? Is it when the first trigger is pulled? Or when the first lie is told? Patty Hearst never looked afraid in that bank footage. Bonnie and Clyde never paused to spare a life. And Jeffrey Erickson? He knew every name on that guard roster before he let them bleed. This is why the FBI files don't just tell stories. They carry warnings. Reminders that evil doesn't always arrive in a ski mask. Sometimes, it walks in smiling, wearing a badge, a beret, or a wedding ring. Bonnie Parker's mother wept over an open casket with 50 bullet wounds. Patty Hearst's father spent $2 million feeding strangers, but never got his daughter back, not the one he remembered. The Loomis families attended closed casket funerals for fathers who never made it home. The newspapers moved on. The headlines faded. But trauma, it lingers. In widows. In children. In communities who now watch armored trucks with a little more suspicion. These stories didn't just make history. They left it scarred. In the end, what makes a crime story unforgettable? It's not just the amount stolen. It's not just the bodies. It's the why. The moment you realize that the greatest danger in any system isn't the outsider trying to break in. It's the insider who decides the rules no longer apply to them. Some wear uniforms. Some wear diamonds. Some hold rifles with roses. But all of them believed they were above the law. And for a moment, they were. But the fall always comes. So if this story made you question who you trust, if it pulled you in and shook you, smash that like button. Subscribe for more real stories of betrayal, ambition, and justice served cold. And remember, sometimes the scariest criminals are the ones who already have the keys.